What is up, everybody? Welcome to Drunken Horror Adventures. I'm Travis, and let's just do a little throwback. I am fucking drunk. If you listened to last week's episode when I was talking about Escape Room, you'll know that we changed our name. It's not Travis and Vic's Drunken Horror Adventures anymore. It's just Drunken Horror Adventures. Need a new logo, but we'll roll with what we have for now. Tonight, we are talking to the Chicago history cop, Ray Johnson, about the Ripper Crew, or the Chicago Rippers, who were a satanic cult and organized crime group composed of Robin Gecht and three associates, Edward Spreitzer and brothers Andrew and Thomas Cocorellis. They were suspected in the disappearances of 18 women in Illinois between 1981 and 1982, the year of my birth. It is generally if you tune into our show, I don't give any kind of warnings other than this show will have heavy spoilers, blah, 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 blah. But since this is a true crime episode, the warning that I'm going to give right now is that this is a very, very disturbing episode. I just want to say, listener, beware. This is going to be rough to talk about, to even listen to. So let's get into things right now before we have anybody on the line. It's just Travis right now. So the first victim of the gang, well, here comes Blake, but the first victim of the gang was 28-year-old Linda Sutton, who was a sex worker who was abducted on May 23rd, 1981. What's up, Blake?
Hey, gentlemen, what's up?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Missed the hell out of you two guys. Hope everything's well with you.
Oh, yeah, it's been like a month.
Sorry, I meant to send you guys Merry Christmas and all that, but you guys had so much going on, as did I, so I kind of just hoped you understood. Happy belated Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Well, first, let me say thank you for the book. I have not cracked it open. I won't lie to you. I'm not going to bullshit you on this show. I have not opened it up yet, but I've been eager to do so. I've just not had the time yet, but I'm excited to do it. In case everybody didn't know, Blake Best is our mustachioed aficionado of Elm Street, the man behind, name the book, Blake, the newest book, that is. One of the men behind it.
One of the men behind the Screams, the Dream Masters Revealed, and then the man behind Razor's Edge and the Within. Yes.
Yep, and I love these behind-the-scenes books, so I'm very excited about reading about this one for that Blake and Mick Strawn worked on. A couple of our boys, obviously. Blake, I don't know if you noticed, but we actually changed the name of the show now. It's just called Drunken Horror Adventures because you're such a big part of it. Vic's such a big part of it that I felt like it was just wrong to call it Travis and Vic's anymore. You know what I mean? It was just, there's so many people that are a big part of it that, it's like you're an unofficial host now.
You guys are like, my... You're not just my friends, you're my brothers. I love you both to death, but you're also like the older, always drunken, never bullshitting brothers that I never had,
My man. Well, I think Vic is actually calling in from a landline. What's up, Vic?
What up, what up?
It's weird not to see that 270 area code flash across. Coughing up a lung? That's nice. Vic just calls in to cough up a lung on the air. Vic's currently at work. Vic actually chose this topic this week. I was going with 10 Chicago crime. Say what?
I'm so sorry, I'm dying, fellas.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I've been dying off and on
buddy.
this.
You okay? Take it easy. You're all right.
So Vic's working right now, so he's doing his usual Vic thing. But yeah, man, this is actually a Vic selection, the Chicago Rippers. Blake, had you ever heard of them before we kind of brought it up? I know you're a true crime guy, so you probably have, but maybe not. I hadn't.
I had heard of them, but hadn't really studied them as heavily as some of the others. Mostly because they came to prominence. I don't know why I say prominence, because there's nothing positive about what they did. Well, they came to light as far as their crimes in the early '80s. Most of the ones I focused on were either way before that, like Ed Gein and Albert Fish and H.H. Holmes, and then a lot of them came later, like Dahmer and Bundy, and some in the mid-'70s. It's funny, Gacy, came to mind, and then the obvious connection between Gacy and these guys is, well, one of these gentlemen. I don't know why I say gentlemen again. That's giving them more credit than what they deserve. They were atrocious people, and what they did was absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, man, we've talked about Chikatilo, we've talked about Albert Fish, we've talked about some of the sickest of the sick. And I have to tell you, the Chicago Ripper crew, Chicago Rippers, the Ripper crew, whatever the fuck you want to call them, whatever the name for them is, these guys might be the most disgusting, brutal, horrifying killers that we've talked about. Because I don't want to call them serial killers. I'm not sure that applies.
I thought Chikatilo was bad, but I'm going to say on one incident, the makeshift hatchet and the wood handle. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I actually told my wife that I was doing the show, and she normally loves to listen, and all that kind of, at least is curious. I said, just don't even ask about this one, because this one's too much. This one's much, too much for me. It just reading about what they did, and I love my wife, and then just think about some of the stuff that happened with these people, and then one specific incident I'm sure we'll get into, the lady that was Chinese, the situation with her and her brother, and that whole little situation. I won't ruin it, but we'll get into it. But I'm certain that guy wakes up every day and is tremendously guilty and has to live with that guilt for the rest of his life.
I mean, their crimes were against women. There were none against men that we know of, but everything that they did makes me squirm, and it was against the opposite sex or gender, and it was just fucking disgusting. So I'm hoping Ray calls in shortly. I know sometimes TalkShoe isn't user-friendly, so we'll see. Whenever he calls in, he calls in.
It's funny that, Ray is our resident Chicago expert, and he's written up, plethora of books, and he's got been on television and all this kind of stuff, and done a lot of the same stuff that I have. We both work in, what I would consider a horror. His is more stemmed towards real life. His is more rooted in real life, obviously, and is rooted in real life. Mine is fictional, but, it just, the volume of stuff from Chicago. I watched a little bit of a documentary earlier today just to kind of reacquaint myself with everything. It was called Cult Crimes. It was a video of it on YouTube. I didn't finish it, but, they go into H.H. Holmes, and then they go into Al Capone and that whole mess. And then they go into, John Wayne Gacy, and then they go into these guys. And I'm just like, Chicago has a history of, like what they said in the video, and most cities and places have got their light and their dark, and Chicago certainly has their fair share. But it's funny, ironic that these guys were suspects in the appearance of a famous baseball player's wife, but they were actually ended up not being responsible for that. But whenever a woman came up missing, these guys, during that time period, these guys were suspects.
We just talked about him. The man is introed in. What's up, Chicago history cop Ray Johnson? How you doing, sir?
Hey, what's up? How you guys doing?
Well, we're talking about a subject for once where I think at least you lived through it on some level. I know you're probably younger at the time. I was born like the year that they were arrested. So, but maybe you have some memories of when the hell this went down. I don't know, because I remember Dahmer when I was a kid. I remember a little bit about Gacy when I was a kid. I don't know.
Sure.
Ray, do you have any memories of these sick bastards, the Chicago Ripper crew?
Here's the thing: is I was a sophomore in high school when this was going on, but there wasn't. I mean, it was in the papers, but it was nowhere near as covered by the press as, somewhat in the newspapers, but as far as the television was concerned, Gacy was everywhere. But these guys were almost non-existent. So it wasn't really until after, I had gotten out of the military and had come back and started doing the job as a cop and kind of looking into Chicago history that I even came across these guys, which to me was really weird, considering how, these guys were despicable. These guys were heinous. These guys were just unbelievable. And it was basically so recent. It's crazy. So, so I don't have any memories, even though I think I was about 15 at the time, of these guys in general. So I'm not sure why they didn't get the press. There could have been something else going on in the media at the time that took over, some of the coverage or whatnot. I'm not really sure. I didn't look into why I didn't know anything about these guys, but it wasn't until much later that I came across them. And even now, they're not really covered all that well. You hear Chicago Rippers, and most people, or Chicago Ripper crew, and most people look at you like you got three heads.
Well, yeah. That, and you've also got at this whole time this was going on, you had the Atlanta child murders, Wayne Williams and all that was getting so much coverage. So there was like a lot of other.
Yeah, Wayne Williams. That got a lot of coverage because I remember that, which is really funny because I was living in Chicago, but the news wasn't really covering these guys all that well.
Yeah, it is really weird. And I'll just throw their names out: Robert Gecht, Edward Spreitzer, Andrew Cocorellis, Thomas Cocorellis. And the weird thing about these guys is, Ray, we've talked about Richard Speck, we've talked about John Wayne Gacy, H.H. Holmes, and,
right.
Aside from some speculation, we haven't found anybody that's worked as a crew before that we've talked about other than this one. Obviously we've talked about some great tragedies and things of that nature, but this is the one where we know for a fact that there were more than one person working together and committing vile, horrible acts. And I think they are maybe the worst I've ever even talked about on this show. And that's a lot.
They're tough. These guys were kind of like the Manson family of the 80s. So, you had, Robin Gecht, who was kind of like the Charles Manson. It was kind of like Chicago's version of the Manson family, really, sort of.
Well, and his followers had the same fear that Manson's followers did. If you've heard about, the different confessions, they take it back whenever they see Robin Gecht just walk by and look at them. They obviously believed. They claimed that they believed he had, greater powers. I don't know if that's true or not, but they definitely were scared of him, and that's bizarre in 1982.
I would have probably. Well, the thing was is that usually, when you talk about the early 80s or late 70s, that was the time where you had kind of, you had The Exorcist that had just come out, The Omen, you had Rosemary's Baby. So there was this big resurgence in people being scared of the devil and Satanists and stuff like that. So it was all over the media. Anton LaVey was pretty prevalent in that whole Church of Satan thing. So it was during I had done some research into a guy, Frederick D'Archega, who was in Chicago in the 70s, and he ran an occult bookstore. And his occult bookstore was also a pagan temple. They didn't have it wasn't the same type of thing as these guys. He wasn't sacrificing people as far as we know, but he considered himself a witch, and it was right after The Exorcist had come out, and people were just freaking out because they had seen The Exorcist, which, at the time and even now is probably one of the most, and Rosemary's Baby still freaks me out if I watch that. So you had, this was kind of at the height of all that going on. So there was a big kind of panic as, in a result of, satanic worship and stuff like that. So So these guys, obviously followers, they're not the sharpest tools in the shed, and because they're followers, they're pretty easily manipulated. What amazes me is that these people tend to find each other. So people like Robin Geck and Charles Manson and some, Jim Jones and all these guys tend to be able to walk into a room, and they walked into a room